So the fact that you're all here, I want to congratulate everyone for coming here tonight, for showing up, regardless of how hard your jobs are on a day-to-day basis. And we're going to go through these results tonight, just to see, like, what is it that we are saying or feeling at an ecosystem perspective. So the point of today is to discuss what challenges do we have and how do we collaborate as an ecosystem to fix those issues. Let's get into who was the typical respondent of this, right? 69% of our respondents today, their primary function is that of cybersecurity. You are cybersecurity specialists in your own right. And then 19% of us as a community would report into a CIO. So it's not necessarily that you are yet a standalone functional entity. At the moment, the CISO world is seen as part of the technology ecosystem. Whether that's right or wrong is a debate that we need to have, because I think it's an important conversation to have. And this actually came out again as part of the survey results. And 29% of respondents are from financial services, which is not necessarily a surprise, because I think all the big banks would probably hire a majority of cyber skills because they are a big employer of the South African ecosystem. And then 34% are from organizations which employ 10,000 plus people. So these are not small corporate organizations that we're necessarily speaking about. Now, the question that's key for all of us is cybersecurity a board priority? And this was a question that we were all asked when we were completing this survey. And what majority of us have said yes, 93% of us have said yes, it is a board priority, but 5% only wake up after a breach. Now, okay, let's talk about what do I need to do to invest in cyber, because you've had a breach. So now it's not really, yeah, we understand at the back of our minds that cyber is important, but how important is it? 2% of our boards seem to think it's maybe not that important. It's important, but not that important. Becomes a priority only post a breach. And then now it comes to our security budget. So now if you actually compare like last year to those who were part of this prestigious event last year, the stats on our next slide, to slide 3, thank you, speaks to our security budgets. So if we compare this year on year, now if we compare this, our budget from what we were given last year, bearing in mind, I think it's also important that we're kind of like getting out of the slumber from like COVID, right? Which COVID, I think, forced all of our boards as well as executive to really prioritize digitizing our businesses and security, because now everything is online, we're all working from home. Security becomes a priority by virtue of the fact that you don't want your clients to be hacked, you want to show up as a reliable corporate to your customers. So customer becomes king in that moment in time. It goes to show that in 2023, our spend, you'd hope that it would be much more than what it is right now, but it again shows when we are in a more comfortable ecosystem, the spend that you would anticipate getting from security as well as technology spend decreases when people feel like, it's cool, we've got this, right? Which is a cause of concern. And then the barriers to security investment directly. Right? I mean, there's many reasons that all of us have given around why we feel like these barriers actually exist. There's cost involved, obviously. I think cybersecurity and security spend is viewed as a grudge purchase, unfortunately. So the data is saying that it is viewed as a necessary evil in the world that we now live in. But it's viewed in the same way as insurance, really. Like I think our keynote speaker made a great point around like insurance, like less than 10% of our, hopefully all of us here are insured, like we're driving vehicles that are insured because, wow, we live in South Africa. I mean, all of us become victims of crime at any point in time. So insurance is a necessary evil. But sadly, this translates the same way into some of our corporate organizations, as we can clearly see from these results. So it is seen as like a grudge purchase. It's an important purchase because you want to be seen as compliant. If you are a regulated entity, I belong to one, so we want to actually show up as compliant for our clients. And some of the key other barriers are lack of security skills that exist, which I think all of us can relate to. So measuring effectiveness of expenditure was like, how do you then equate this? So all of this, my ramblings kind of are making sense, because all of this comes down again to how are we measured, right? So the measure by number of attacks presented, like the threats that all of us are able to block, that you are able to block, compliance outcomes, and the measure of trends and incidents versus what is the cost exposure and the cost loss that you generate as a result of whatever incidents that we are navigating through. A lot of us, 18% of us, and compared to 17%, are saying that we're not formally measured. So you actually are shooting in the wind, because what the work you're doing is not necessarily formally measured, which in and of itself is wrong. It's not right. And that's probably something that all of us need to start thinking about. How do we actually make sure that what gets measured gets done? Because we are able to show the data around, this is the potential revenue loss you're going to get as a business as a result of this. So yes, specifically for cyber, which is a good thing, I guess, 53% in comparison to 42% last year is a good measure, because it means that we actually recognize the devastating loss, financial loss that could happen in an event that we do have a cyber attack. So, but not all of us necessarily have it specifically for cyber. Some of us, it's part of a broader insurance that you have. So it might cover something within your ecosystem, but not everything. And then 5% don't see the need in 2023 to actually have cyber insurance, which is potentially concerning, because it means that there's still an ecosystem that will thrive from threats and organizations not being protected as a result. And the frequency of risk assessments that will happen, it says once a year here. This is amazing for those. I think the once a year, the 33% versus 32% from last year, are probably people who are not in financial services, because if you're in financial services, you get risk assessed more than once a year, right? So kudos to you if this happens once a year or once a quarter. Once every 6 months is still a significant number, which is great, because at least, you know, we're measuring how frequently we need to be actually upping our ante when it actually comes to cybersecurity threats that all of us need to make sure, from a penetration testing perspective, we want to make sure that you're secure, your clients are secure. So I would certainly, I think everyone in this room would advocate for more risk assessments, because unfortunately, risk is the way that you sometimes get our boards to understand that you must invest in something. If it's part of your risk expo on your risk board, chances are you'll get budget to support it, because if it's cyber, I'm hoping that is part of all of our top 10 risks within our ecosystem. And we actually had a conversation around this, I think 2 nights ago, around how many of us have cyber as a top 5 risk. I think you actually mentioned 5, not even 10. So this is actually a good statistic, I would think. Although once a month, the once a month is probably financial services people. I empathize with you, I'm in the same boat as you. And for some people, maybe that's too much. And if it's too much, then I understand why it should be too much, because on top of your day job, now you must deal with risk people. It's not the greatest thing to do. And then our top 3 cyber risks seem to be, have changed from a trend perspective. In 2023, what we're seeing is that phishing, ransomware, and insider attacks are increasing more. And I think what's interesting as a result of the insider attacks, because everything leans into where we are from a South African perspective, the economy, the interest rate hikes, and everything that's happening, our people are being squeezed. So it's not surprising that we have an increase in insider, actually from 2022, it's going down somewhat, but that could speak to many things in terms of the ecosystem of employment after COVID picking up somewhat. So people are not really as desperate, and I think this is something that all of us as corporates need to take a moment and reflect upon, around the grave issues that exist in our ecosystem and how we can actually try and salvage and help in a way. Again, creating skills from an ecosystem of like kids in varsity, because there's lots of graduates who have gone to school to study who don't have employment because our economy has not grown enough to allow us to absorb as many as we should. But are we creating, and this is a question that I reflect on, that I'm hoping all of us will reflect on today, an ecosystem that is enabled to create employment? Because again, this is not a government problem, it's also a corporate SA problem, right? For all of us to actually solve for the grave issue of unemployment, because in our sector, there's no, when you train cybersecurity individuals, you lose them immediately once they learn. So there's employment in this country, at least in our sector, but I guess it's the question around how do we help to get exposure around how cool cybersecurity is and how cool jobs in tech really are, because we need the people and we need the people to actually stay. So I'm not surprised, I don't think any of us are surprised at the trends that we're seeing as part of the results that have come through. And then what staff-related incidents did each of us suffer? Because this was obviously speaking to all of us as an ecosystem. 55% did not suffer any staff-related incidents, which is great, because your employee value proposition is amazing. So please thank your HR teams there, because then your people are not necessarily faced with the economic conundrum of who do I then go to? Because people I think we know cyber criminals lean into vulnerability and your lowest working earner in an ecosystem. And that's how your insider threats actually happen. Unauthorized access was 19%, and then IT infrastructure sabotage was 0%. So kudos to all of our infrastructure leaders, the CIOs, the security experts in here who make sure that you scrutinize our service providers who actually come into our ecosystem. So that's a great thing to see. And the next question was really around what security tools and solutions have we implemented. Firewall protection is a standard for all of us. We actually need to make sure that you don't allow anybody to just enter your ecosystem without putting up a valid fight, because you don't want to get hacked and you want to, like I said before, ensure that your clients trust that their golden tools that they have with you that are invested in you are safe. The end protection is obviously critical. It would still remain high because we still have a workforce that is still partially working from home. I don't think, not everyone has necessarily migrated back fully to the office, so I don't think any of us would be surprised at the results that we're getting here, with our top 3 being anti-malware, endpoint protection, as well as firewall being the security tools that are still heavily invested in, that all of us would rely on. And the top methods taken to prevent our insider threats. We monitor and control remote access from all endpoints, including mobile devices. 62% of us, from an ecosystem point of view, have made investments to ensure that that happens, which is encouraging. Perform regular enterprise-wide risk assessments. 64% of respondents have said that this is what they do. And then the highest rated one was 79%, which speaks to enforcing the separation of duties and the principles of least privileged, which is really great, because hopefully the concept of zero trust is one that we're all employing over time. I know it's a concept that's I think for security experts, it's an important one, because you don't want to allow just anybody into your ecosystem. So zero trust should really be what we all aspire to at the end of the day. I know it's a hard sell, because then it means everything is locked down. But how do you also then balance that out with regards to allowing your staff to be nimble enough to work and do the things that they need to do without feeling like they're working in a prison and they have access to nothing in an ecosystem? So getting that balance right becomes critical over time. And then the frequency of staff training. Monthly is very admirable, but it's good to see that at least on an annual basis, a lot of us are leaning towards, at least even if it's once a year, some form of training happening within our staff. So for this, the frequency of staff training would not just look at compliance, but it's also like security trends that are happening, training our staff around what to look out for within the tech ecosystem, specifically with security experts. It's making sure that we have our pulse on the trends that are happening so we can address risks that we see or identify come through quickly enough. So it's encouraging to see that training is a component that's important to most of us. Although in 2023, not at all was 0% compared to 2022. But I suppose in concluding the results, and like when you have a moment yourself, please read it, because it's input that you have given us at an industry level. It's going to help us make the industry